Walking Digital Corridors, another episode, and after a little hiatus, after a move down to Portugal, and various competing forces coming at me right now. But yeah, we're back. We're back today, and next week we're probably going to switch up the days. So next week will be Wednesday as opposed to Thursday. So I'm your bearded sales guy, otherwise known as Alex Abbott, and I'm joined by
Jordan Abbott, who is just realising that he hadn't put Do Not Disturb on, so apologies for the notification. I'm Business Development Manager at the Institute of Sales Professionals, also known as the Sales Poet, because I like to tell stories in outside of the box ways, often to music.
Nice. And if our audience hasn't seen you on LinkedIn, they should definitely go check out your LinkedIn profile and some of your featured sections where I think some of your best work is located, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. Good. So the topic today is about value proposition. So why is your value proposition so important in B2B sales? And I'd love we would love for some audience interaction and some questions today. But from my perspective, I spent 2 or 3 decades now in sales, just over 2 of those decades in B2B sales. And personally, I found it to be one of, if not the most important aspect of the sales job, right? So knowing what you're selling and the differentiating value that thing provides to your customers, I think is fundamental. And it's surprising how many companies, how many sales leaders that I talk to that don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's as you said, it is fundamental. It's the foundation, right? That will fuel everything else. And I'm coming at this from, not having as much experience as you, and I'm sure there's plenty of stories that you've got in relation to, building a value proposition or perhaps the value proposition being handed to you. So are you able to share insight on, what does good look like versus what does great look like, and how accountable should reps, leaders be in actually building that versus, is it just a company responsibility that's then given to the sales org?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me take the second half of that question first, in terms of where it sits, who's responsible, who's accountable, and then I'll come back to perhaps sharing a story of my experiences, because I think traditionally, depending on the type of company, whether it's a technology company or otherwise, my experience of technology companies is that typically the creation of the value proposition would sit with product marketing. The product, they're closely linked to the product team, but they're also linked to the marketing team. And in terms of defining the value that product brings to customers, they play a key role in articulating that, right? So I think there's that aspect, but a lot of product marketing teams will create that, and it will be, say, 1 or 2 dimensional. It will sit there. It's maybe given to the sales team with some training, but it doesn't become a living, breathing thing within the organization that spreads across all of the teams that span the revenue generating operating model. And I think that for me is When I think about what great is, what you know, my experience of what great is when that's happening, it's magical, right? Everyone's aligned. If you're a good salesperson and you have that strategy wrapped around the operating model for you, it becomes far easier for you to do your job. Well, it becomes far easier for everyone that spans that operating model to do their job, especially if they're aligned around that sort of the North Star, that, whatever that North Star is for the organization. I think for technology businesses, it has to be around value and value creation, and what the afters look like. What does great look like if I'm a customer and I end up working with you?
Yeah.
Um, Now, if you don't have the luxury of a product marketing team, then and there isn't anyone else within the organization to create that for you, that strategy, that approach for you, then um, it should really sit with the sales team. In my experience, I've worked with, if I look at uh, three organizations that I've worked with that have played or been part of the majority of that 2-decade career in sales. There was a company called Experian Cheetah Mail. And so, there was Experian Cheetah Mail, there was Responsys, and then there was Oracle, right? So Experian Cheetah Mail, within the marketing services division, we didn't have the luxury of anyone coming in and saying, this is the clearly defined value proposition, and this is how you quantify differentiating commercial value, and this is how you go and have those conversations to generate pipeline, manage deals, and close more deals. And so I had to figure that out for myself. And so I created my own version of a value proposition. And back then it was sort of 2006 to 2010. And it was all about relationships. So me, I was part of the value proposition, if you like. And the approach I created, which back then was a very simple 4-pillar approach. And two of the pillars were quite fundamental. One was around the demo and the technology. The other was around the services that we wrapped around the technology, back then delivered by account managers. So in terms of that path to value using the technology, I was able to articulate that. And then the other one was, because we were an email marketing business, it was around deliverability and identifying, the commercial value in and around managing email delivery effectively into the inbox.
Yeah.
The fourth one, just to round that off, was strategy, but and that started really. So because I created that, I could then rinse and repeat that story, that message every time I would speak to someone after I'd built a relationship with them. Then in 2010, I joined a business called Responsys, and we went on this journey of creating a value proposition that was born out of the hearts and minds of our CEO and our CSO, Chief Sales Officer at the time. And then that kind of just like filtered through, strong leadership filtered through across the organization in terms of, what our vision was, what that value proposition was, what it was made up of. Then from a sales perspective, how you would then, open new doors, challenge existing thinking, very much insight led as opposed to relationship led. If
Yeah.
anyone's familiar with the challenger sale, you're all about provocating and challenging thinking. Right the way through to the end of the sales process where we were closing deals, and the narrative and the language that we were using was understood across all of the teams, not just sales and marketing and pre-sales and any other services folks that would support us in the pre-sale activity. But we knew exactly the direction in which we were taking prospective customers, existing customers, and the things that they would need to do in the technology in order to extract maximum value. And there's something quite magical when you've gone through that approach, that you've done that work, because it gives you so much confidence as a salesperson going into a conversation, knowing where you need to take that conversation. Because for the most part, our buyers, they don't know. They only know what they know, and they don't know what they don't know. And so they're used to working in a certain way, and for the most part, new technology means they have to work in a different way in order to get value from it, as long as it's aligned to their overall strategy.
Yeah.
So a lot of the approach was about education. But a key part of this is knowing where you want to take, what are you educating on? Why are you educating this person, this team on it, and where are you trying to take the conversation?
Yeah.
And then tailoring that approach, depending on which stakeholder you might be talking to, in order to build consensus effectively. And that was sort of between 2010, 2014. You could say the approach worked, given that Oracle acquired Responses for $1.5 billion in 2014. And then, as a sales leader on a trajectory of career growth myself, I then basically replayed what I'd learned from 2014 to 2020 in my various roles within Oracle. And today, now I've adapted that approach. So I think the value proposition in terms of the solution that we provide to our customers, if created through the lens of the buyer, can be incredibly powerful. However, the biggest difference today that we've seen in the last few years is getting that message in front of your ideal buyer is difficult, because there's so much noise out there, and buyers ignore that noise. So I believe that there are either two value propositions: personal brand as well as company value prop and company brand, or we ask a question: where does the value proposition start? So is it one value proposition that starts with the personal brand, given that marketing and traditional marketing messaging and insight isn't penetrating the zone of resistance anymore?
Yeah. It's a good question. Or does that personal brand piece sit within the value proposition, and that sort of relationship pillar within your approach at Experience Cheetah Mail?
Yeah.
That's the question. I think what we're seeing is, we know that our buyers don't want to be sold to. 72% say that they'd rather a rep-free experience, but in the same piece of Gartner research, 79% say that they wanted to ask a human a question, because, as you said, they don't necessarily know. They need their help, and sometimes talking to a salesperson is the cheapest piece of consultancy work that a client will ever receive, when done right. When that value proposition is crystallized, when you've got that path to value laid out that is prescriptive, that's going to help drive adoption, that's going to help maximize the value that client can extract.
Yeah, but the problem is, buyers don't believe what salespeople say. So even if they've been through the best training in the world to be able to articulate that commercial value and tailor that in the most effective way, then no one's going to listen to them unless they appear like a trustworthy, genuine, authentic individual that's actually worth having a conversation with, like a meaningful conversation, where the buyer doesn't feel like they're going to be sold to, and the salesperson only cares about themselves.
Indeed, I completely agree, and it's sparked two things in my mind. Conscious of time, because I do have a hard stop. Initially, it's, where does where does that trust lie within the value proposition, driving trust? Because we know that it is a prerequisite of purchase. 80% of buyers say that it's really important. 45% say that it's more important than a product feature or price.
Yeah.
Right? I think
What's
that
that
was
personal brand?
that's trust. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
Right. I think that was HBR research, and then the buyer experience. That is a crucial piece of that value prop in my eyes, because it is just as important as product feature or price. I have to refresh my memory, but I think it was Salesforce that ran a piece of research, and again found that it was just as important, or if not more important than price, for our buyers. And then the final piece is, and perhaps I think we need another conversation on this,
For sure.
is how often does that value prop need to be revisited? Because if we're looking at it from that lens of putting the buyer at the heart, there's drastic shifts taking place in buyer behaviours in the market. While product may not change too drastically, of course, there's periods and consistent development taking place. But when we're thinking about that unified go-to-market function, creating those feedback loops, what feedback is the sales team getting from the market? What feedback is CS or account management hearing from existing clients? How is that going to feed into that value prop and create this dynamic, living, breathing thing?
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that next time the question that we should tackle is, where does the value proposition start
Yeah.
before we get to that point?
Okay.
So why don't we talk about that next Wednesday?
Perfect. Looking
Cool.
forward to it.
I'll let you run. Thank you for listening. Until next time on Walking Digital Corridors, which will be next Wednesday. See you then. Have a great week, folks.